Everybody, we start the class now. And so in the last class, we discussed about N-gram language model, and we will continue our discussion after recapitulating a little bit. So can you see my slides?
Yes, ma'am.
So feel free to interrupt me when you want to ask something. Now, as we were trying to look at, we were looking at the probabilistic model of language. And this is a model which will give high probability to sentences which are likely to appear, or which, if you look at a real corpus of real sentences which are out there, they will have high probability. Whereas a sentence which is not likely will have smaller probability. So to every sentence, this is a little bit digression from really looking at the sentence and trying to find whether it is grammatically correct, whether it is semantically meaningful. We want to simplify this task by looking at the probability of occurrence. And related to this is the conditional probability, as we have discussed. We can find out what is the probability of the current word given the previous words in the sentence. So, and why we are studying language modeling? Because language modeling has a very important role to play in many NLP tasks, and it's one of the most useful tools that we have. For example, in speech recognition, given the sequence of phonemes, we want to know whether I ate a cherry is more likely than I ate a cherry, which has a similar sequence of phonemes. In machine translation, you want to understand that high wins tonight is more likely than large wins tonight. Or in context-sensitive spelling correction, if you look at the sentences, there are problems with this sentence. Every word is correct, but in this context, wit is not the most likely word. Then for sentence completion in predicting the next word or next words in the sentence. These are some examples of use of language model. And as we have discussed in the last class, we can, if we look at the sentence as a sequence of words using the chain rule of calculus, we can write it in this form. For example, suppose you have the sentence, you like green cream and want to find the probability. You can decompose it by the chain rule as probability of u times probability of like given u and so on. Okay. And we also discussed that these probabilities can be estimated empirically using maximum likelihood estimate from a large corpus that you use. From the corpus, if you want to find out the probability of u, this is the unigram probability, you can find out the number of times u occurs in the corpus divided by the total number of words. Whereas for conditional probability, what is the probability that like follows u? You look at the count of u like in the corpus divided by the count of u. And similarly, probability of cream given u like cream, you find the count of u like cream divided by count of u like cream. So you can estimate this, and based on this and the Markov assumption of an N-gram model, you can estimate the probability of the sentence. One issue that we face is that there is not enough data. So for example, just look at some numbers. If you look at an Oxford dictionary, it has roughly 2 lakh words. 2 million words. The number of pairs of words, if you look at, if this is V square is 4 trillion. Total number of possible sequence of 2 words. However, all of them do not occur naturally. So V cube is 8 into 10 to the power 18, which is such a large number, it may exceed the total data storage available in all the disk space worldwide. So if you really have to keep counts of all bigrams, all possible trigrams, that is huge. And so therefore, we settle for approximation. Right? And we approximate using n-gram models. Unigram means we approximate by probability of single words, product of probabilities of single words. But if we do that, it's not a very good approximation, because you are looking at every word separately. Now, separately, these words may be have some likelihood, but when you put them together, for example, when you put green cream together, it may have less likelihood. Then you can go for bigram model, when you estimate it by bigram probability, where you look at the probability of a word conditioned by one previous word. Now, just to give an example, that this is a small corpus, which is called the Berkeley Restaurant Project, where they have collected a corpus of people wanting to eat out in restaurants around Berkeley. And from this corpus, we have collected the frequencies of the unigrams and bigrams. And these are the frequencies what I want to eat. So suppose this is the sentence, and this table shows the bigram counts. For example, to eat, there are 686 occurrences. 224 occurrences, 2 Chinese 2 occurrences, 2 food 0 occurrence, 2 lunch 6 occurrence, 2 spent 211 occurrence. So you put the counts of all bigrams in this table, and using this table, you can find out the probability of a sentence, such as I want to eat Chinese food, etc. And we have already looked at how to count. So from this corpus, for example, this is a sample from the corpus. These are unigram frequencies of these 8 words, and these are the bigram frequencies. Now, there are some small practical issues. When we look at a sentence, what you not necessarily just only look at the previous word, you also look at whether you are beginning of the sentence or ending the sentence. So typically, you can incorporate 2 special symbols, one for beginning of sentence, one for end of sentence, so that you know whether I is more likely, irrespective of the unigram probability of I or each, you want to understand whether I is more probable in the beginning of a sentence or each is more probable. So this sentence, you like green cream, will be coded like this. Okay. And based on this, so you count this S and backslash S, S and slash S, beginning and end of sentence as 2 special symbols, and you also incorporate them in your bigram counts. So this ensures that sum of probabilities, so if you do it correctly using these probabilities, it makes sure that the probabilities that sum up to 1. Also, you can talk about the probability, some words are more likely to start a sentence, etc. And then given this, you can compute the probability of a sentence. I want English food as probability of I given start times probability want given I, etc. and probability end given food. And based on this, you can compute the probability. Okay. So this is the basic n-gram computation and how it is used. Now, there are some other practical considerations, because we are taking products of probabilities. And if the sentence is long or the text is long, when you take the product, as you know, the numbers can become very, very small, and there may be underflow depending on the precision of your computer. So a practical way of doing this is, instead of trying to compute this probability, you look at the log of this probability. So if a probability is higher, the log of probability is also higher. So you can operate in the log space. And what is the advantage of operating in the log space? Log of this product can be written as the sum of the logs of these probabilities, right? And the sum is easy, faster to compute, and the values do not underflow. Is this okay? So, and these are the parameters of the model, and these are the sort of knowledge that you capture by these parameters. Now, there are some issues. There are certain words, as some of you pointed out in the last class, these words are not seen in the corpus, but it may come in the test set. Now, because they have not been seen, the probabilities involving those words will become zero. And when you are taking, product of the probabilities, one of them becoming zero makes everything to be zero. So there are various ways, and including more sophisticated ways of handling such out of vocabulary words. In NLP, this is very important. Of course, now there are a lot of these things. The simplest way of classical way of addressing the issue of out of vocabulary word is to use a special symbol, let's say called unknown. And whenever a word occurs, you treat it as unknown. And in the test corpus also, training corpus also, the first time you find a new word, you replace it by unknown. So you also find the probabilities related to unknown and you can use it. There are, of course, other sophisticated models which are used, for example, character-based models and many others which are used currently. Okay, so this is a brief of what we discussed in the last class. Do you have any questions?
Ma'am, how do we, hello?
Yes, please.
Ma'am, how do we handle that unknown? I didn't get it.
So there are various ways. One simple way is that you incorporate one special symbol called unknown, and from your corpus, you choose a vocabulary, fixed vocabulary. Let us say the most frequent words. Just a minute. I'm sorry. So one of the things is that, fix a vocabulary, and any word that occurs in the corpus outside that vocabulary, you tag it as unknown. So when you find the statistics of the counts, unknown is also one of the word for which you have found the statistics. Okay. And so therefore, in the test corpus, whenever unknown occurs, you can still use the probability of unknown following some other word or some other word following unknown. Is that okay?
Hello, ma'am.
Yeah.
Ma'am, in the second approach, it is said that we replace the first occurrence of each word in the training data with unknown. Won't it increase the probability of unknown by way too much if we replace each
So basically, it says that this. So if you start processing the corpus, so whatever you have seen is what is known. A new word that you come across is unknown. Right. So what is your concern? Depending on how.
So like I thought it as was two approaches. Like first was like if I saw a new word, I just replace it with unknown. Like if it is not in my vocabulary.
Right.
While I thought the second approach is we replace the first occurrence of each word in the training data with unknown.
Right.
These are two separate approaches, right?
Yeah.
So in the second approach, won't the probability of unknown would increase, like when we are predicting the sentences?
It may increase, but this is what is realistic. Na? What is an unknown word to you? A word that you haven't seen before.
Right.
Every time you see a new word, it is unknown. Second time it occurs, it is known.
Okay, right.
again, what I am talking about in this class is some basic approaches. And in fact, while we talk about smoothing later today, we will also talk about very simple smoothing methods. There are very advanced, not very, but more sophisticated smoothing methods, which for interest of time, I will not cover in this course. But you can look at chapter 3 of Jurafsky and Martin's book of the good Turing method, Nesser-Ney method, especially the good Turing method, how it uses unknown words for the smoothing. Smoothing will come to later, right? But this is what is unknown. Unknown is when a word occurs. I have after 12. So whenever a word occurs first time, it is unknown, right? This is what it is captured. And so the larger is the corpus, less frequently you will get unknown, but you will always get unknown words in a natural language corpus. And the frequency with which the unknown word occurs, that is determined by an empirical law called Zipf's law. It's a very interesting empirical finding, and if we have time in the course, I will discuss Zipf's law a little bit.
Ma'am, number of unknown words will be the total number of words in the dictionary, right?
No, unknown words, beyond the dictionary also you can get words. Unknown words are words, if you fix a dictionary beforehand, in the first approach, you fix a dictionary, everything outside the dictionary is an unknown word. In the second approach, you don't fix a dictionary, but first time you see a word, it is unknown. Second time, it becomes known. When you see the word the first time set. Of course, you can't do it in the test corpus because you will not have the count, or unless you update the count. The first time you get any word, it is an unknown word. You treat it as unknown. But then you incorporate it in the dictionary and incorporate its count, and second time you treat it as a known word because you've got some statistics of that word.
I mean, second approach, number of unknown words will be the total number of distinct words in the corpus, right?
No, so look, as I said, in the second approach, the words which are unknown is dynamic. Okay. In the extreme case, initially every word is unknown because you haven't seen any language, right? You are starting out in the midst of a population which speaks a language. You do not know any word in the language. Everything is unknown. So when you incorporate one word, understand it, then it becomes known to you. Okay.
Ma'am,
but that occurrence is unknown. Why it is important? You are trying to find out the statistics of unknown words occurring. But that particular word henceforth becomes known to you. Okay. Is it clear? It's not that the word remains unknown.
Ma'am, then in the second approach, there is no role of the vocabulary.
No, this is a second approach is a different approach. This is approach 1, this is approach 2.
Okay.
There is the vocabulary, but vocabulary is dynamic. Vocabulary is the set of words, it is dynamic. After you finish processing the training set, all the words in the vocabulary is in your vocabulary. All the words in the corpus is in your vocabulary. But when you start, the vocabulary is empty. And when you end, the vocabulary is the set of all words in the corpus. Now, at the end of the training set, you fix your vocabulary. In the test set, anything outside the vocabulary is unknown.
Yes,
Is this clear? Basically, what we want is that we treat unknown, just like we say beginning of sentence, end of sentence, these are special symbols. We also treat unknown as a special symbol. And therefore, we can find out the probability of bigrams and unigrams, trigrams involving unknown. Okay. Is this clear?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so unknown words actually have been a pain point for many NLP tasks. And whenever you do some task, because of the productivity of language and the creativity and productivity of language, you have to have some way of handling unknown words. And this is a simple way. These two are very simple ways of handling unknown words. There are also, so typically if you look at a language like English, Hindi, etc., even though the words are very, that you cannot fix the set of words. The set of characters is fixed, right? So English has 26 characters. To that you can add the punctuation symbols, etc., beginning sentence, end sentence, etc. So the set of characters is fixed. Okay. So if your language model is defined on characters, then there will be no unknown. Is it okay? So you can have character-based language models, and character-based language models will not suffer from the unknown vocabulary problem.
Ma'am, if there's a spelling mistake, let's say, so we may accidentally treat it as unknown, right?
No, I mean in the character-based approach or this other approach, yes.
In the first approach,
you will treat it as unknown. But separately addressing spelling mistake is an NLP application. But yes, you will treat it as unknown. Okay, unless you pre-process and correct the spelling. Any questions? Any other questions?
So while retraining, right? I mean, that unknown we can remove, and right? I mean, the next iteration.
Can you repeat?
I'm asking, like, once the model is trained, and you're saying like in the test data we have that unknown, but if we want to retrain that again, right, for the next iteration, then we can remove unknown and make it like that.
Finish training, all the words in the training corpus become known. They are all known. But in the test corpus, that is test you are getting new sentences, there you can incorporate and there you can find unknown words.
Right.
Okay. And in natural language, the characteristic of natural language is no matter, even if you take this huge billion or even trillion word corpus, Google Books, Wiki, whatever, if you take even this large corpus, you can still not say that I have incorporated all possible words. Still you can encompass new words. So you have to be able to handle unknown words. How to evaluate whether a language model is good enough? Now we have various n-gram language models. We have discussed unigram, bigram, trigram, quadrigram, pentagram, and so on. Or we can have some other type of language model, which we haven't discussed yet. But we want to know whether a language model is good, or we want to compare two language models. And we will discuss how language models can be evaluated, or some ways in which the language model can be evaluated. Now, when the training set, in this case on the training corpus, and then you test it on a new set of sentences. So how do you test it? So when you are given some new sentences, you check if the language model gives higher probability to these sentences compared to other sentences which haven't occurred. So a good language model will give higher probability to real sentences or sentences which are more frequently observed compared to sentences which are not real or rarely observed. And what you do is that you get a test set which is different from the training set, and you test the model's performance on this unseen data. And the simplest way to do it, you find the probability of the test sentence. And if this probability is higher, you can say the language model is better. So we have to develop an evaluation metric, whether based on probability or otherwise, which tells us how good or how well the model does on the test set. Now, one of the evaluation metrics which is very popular is the perplexity score. As we said that naively we can go for the probability of the corpus, but probability is a little bit too difficult to work with because the probability values are small. Of course, you can take it to the log domain, etc. But there is another model, another way of evaluation which is more popular, and that is by computing the perplexity score given by the model to the test set. Now we will explain what it is, but before that we will look at two types of evaluations of model, not only language model, any model. One is extrinsic evaluation, the other is intrinsic evaluation. So if you have two models A and B, in extrinsic evaluation, you apply the model to a task. As we said, why do we study language models? Because they are useful in various NLP tasks. For example, let us take the task of speech recognition, right? So you have two language models A and B. You plug in the model A to the speech recognition system and also separately B to the speech recognition system. Otherwise, the system is similar. Now you find out which one of them is doing better in the task of speech recognition. So you take an external task such as speech recognition or machine translation and see which of these language models, when used for this task, gives you better results on that task. So you run the task, get an accuracy for both. For example, a third task is spelling corrector. You can use your language model for spelling correction, right? And then, so for example, suppose in a particular place, you have put example as a wit, and you find out that the probability, if you replace it with the probability of the sentence increases, okay? So it can be used for spelling correction. Now you find out on that task of spelling correction, which of the models work better. Or for machine translation, you find out how many words were translated correctly. Then you compare their accuracies. Now, this extrinsic evaluation, while it is a good thing to do, it has some drawbacks. First of all, it is very time consuming and you have to rely on another model, and that model may take time to run. So you cannot always have the luxury of doing extrinsic evaluation. So you want to try something simpler on a day-to-day basis, and you go for intrinsic evaluation. And one of the popular ways of doing intrinsic evaluation is to use the notion of perplexity. So we will explain the notion by first, giving you the intuition of perplexity. So let us start with a game called the Shannon game. And the idea of the Shannon game, this sort of idea we have come across before. You want to predict the next word, right? Given a part of a sentence, you want to predict the next word, and you look at how well you can predict the next word. For example, suppose the sentence, I always order pizza with cheese and, right? So can you predict the next word? You may write in the chat box. What is the possible next word? So I've got ketchup, tomato, oregano, olives, corn, then mushrooms, jalapenos, chili flakes, pepperoni, and so on. So these are the possible next word. So obviously there are many choices. because there are so many types of pizzas which are popular with people. However, you cannot put any word. For example, you cannot put Obama or bird. You can put, they are not likely. So, the next word is not unique, but there is a set of next words which are more probable, right? You have given many suggestions, but if I ask you to continue giving suggestions, after some time you will not be able to come up with new suggestions which are frequent, which are more probable. Okay. Similarly, for the next sentence, of course, the choices may be less if you are knowledgeable about who this person was. But the third sentence, again, you can have a lot of choices. For example, first sentence, these are some of the choices, and you can also add your choices. And then for the first sentence, out of these choices, based on their counts of occurring in the corpus, we can find the probabilities. We can find what is the probability of mushrooms being the next word, pepperoni being the next word, anchovies being the next word, or the vegetables being the next word, or olives being the next word, and so on, or fried rice being the next word. Okay. Now, if we use a unigram language model, unigram does not take into account what came before. So when I say cheese and something, right? Of course, and does not have any meaning, but when I say cheese and something, it restricts the set of probable words, right? And when you say pizza with cheese and something, it further restricts. But if you do not consider the context and use unigrams, we'll not get some good result. So we want a model of text which assigns a higher probability to the word that actually occurs. So the best language model is the one that best predicts an unseen test sentence given, and that gives the highest probability of that sentence. Now, as I said, there are certain difficulties in working with probabilities. So we define the notion of perplexity. So perplexity of a sequence of words W1, W2, Wn is defined as probability. This probability root over to the power minus 1 by n. That is the nth root of 1 by this probability. So because this probability value is small, we take the inverse. The inverse will become large if there are more terms in the denominator. The inverse will become much larger, right? So in order to normalize by the length of the words, we take the nth root. So we take the nth root of 1 over the probability. So this is the definition of perplexity. Okay. So higher probability means, what does it translate to? If the probability is higher, perplexity will be higher or lower?
Lower.
Perplexity will be lower. So higher probability is lower perplexity. But perplexity, why we are using, we could have used probability because perplexity is easier to work with because there's no underflow problem.
Ma'am, why did we take -1, like nth root?
Nth root, because if you look at the probability, this probability, if suppose n is 5, there's a 5-word sentence, or there is a 25-word sentence, right? A 25-word sentence, the probability will be smaller.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so the value of the probability, if the sentences are more or less similarly, likely, a smaller sentence, this product will be smaller. Product will be larger, and larger sentence, the product will be smaller. So when we take the inverse, for the larger sentence, the inverse will be larger. So we want to compensate for this, right? We have a product of n terms, and we want to compensate for it. So we take the nth root.
Yes, ma'am, got it.
Is it clear? So this is normalization. Taking the nth root is normalization. Now, this is the basic definition of perplexity. But when we are working with the Markov approximation or n-gram approximation, we have to rewrite it suitably. For example, this probability using normal chain rule can be written as this product of this conditional probabilities. And then if you use a Markov model, for example, a bigram model, this is approximated by this. So this is how I define the perplexity for a bigram model. Similarly, you can write it for trigram model, 4-gram model, etc. Okay. So this is the measure that is a simple measure of intrinsic evaluation, and it is based on the probability, but we are taking the inverse so that these numbers become easy to work with, and for normalization we're taking the nth root. Is it clear?
Ma'am, this PP of W, this is the probability of a particular combination of words, or is a combination?
So this is the perplexity. PP is the perplexity, not probability.
Okay.
PP is the perplexity of a sequence of words.
Got it.
So W is W1, W2, Wn, etc. So it can be a sentence or it can be a paragraph. It's a piece of text, right?
Got it.
It could be a document. It's a piece of text which is a sequence of words, and we find the perplexity of that sequence of words. And perplexity is defined to be the probability of the sequence to the power minus 1 by n.
Okay. And in the equation, the nth root of 1 divided with P of W1, W2, that P of W1, W2, etc. are conditional probabilities, right?
It's no. P is just the normal probability.
Okay.
This can be rewritten with conditional probability here.
Okay.
Using the chain rule of calculus. So this is through chain rule. These are equivalent. And this can be approximated using Markovian assumption. Okay. Is this clear?
Okay. So if I understand it right, madam, so if I just take a 5-word sentence, the denominator in the first equation is a probability of those 5 words coming in that sequence. It's just a probability. It's not a conditional probability.
Looks like ma'am got disconnected.
I think ma'am got disconnected. Connectivity issue.
Yeah, I just called madam. She is rejoining. She requested to stay back. She has some time.
I will, ma'am, join or
I think we can wait for some time,
okay.
maybe 5 minutes or something.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Actually, there is a problem in the internet connection in my office. So, I don't think we can continue with the slides right now, but we can discuss a little bit orally, and I'll also take your questions. Or let me finish the discussion on perplexity. So when I got disconnected, there was some question. So can you repeat the question? Then I will answer.
Yes, ma'am. So, Bharat, so I was asking on the right-hand side of the equation, we have nth root of 1 divided by probability of W1, W2 to Wn. So I was asking, let's assume if there is a 5-word sentence. So for that 5-word sentence, let's say I like playing cricket today. So for the denominator will be the probability of that sequence of I like playing cricket today, right?
Right, right.
Got it. That's what I was.
So it's a product of 5 probabilities. And just for the sake, assume that each of these, suppose each of these words has a probability, or each of these conditional probabilities is 1 by 100, suppose, right? If each of them were 1 by 100, this will be 1 by 100 to the power 5 in the denominator.
Understood.
Okay. And when you take the inverse, it will be 100 to the power 5.
Got it.
And we take the 5th root, it will be 100. Suppose there was a 10-word sentence where each of these terms also had a probability of 1 by 100. So this denominator would be 1 by 100 to the power 10. Taking the inverse will give you 100 to the power 10. Taking the 10th root will give you 100. So that is why the normalization comes into play.
Okay.
Ma'am, in playing Shannon game, we wanted to predict the next word, right? Not the probability of entire sentence.
No, we want to predict the next word. Yeah, because that interpretation I will give. Yeah. So in the Shannon game, we are trying to predict the next word, and we are trying to see, how accurately we can predict. Now, if your language model says all these 1 million words are equally likely, then you are not going to do well in the Shannon game. But if your language model accurately can guess, right, what is exactly the next word, then your language model is better. Okay. So if your language model can reduce the branching factor of the next word, then that language model will help you get a better score in the Shannon game.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So one way of interpreting perplexity is that it's somewhat like the branching factor, or a weighted version of the equivalent branching factor. For example, suppose you take these digits 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and you have a number involving these digits. If all these digits are equally likely, right? If each of the digits are equally likely, then the probability of each of them is 1 by 10. Okay. It's 1 by 10, and the perplexity given by that formula will come out to be 10. So the branching factor is 10. But suppose the digit 0 is less likely. Digits 1 to 9 is, or let us say the digits 1 and 0 are very likely, and the rest of the digits are very small likelihood. Okay. Then the equivalent branching factor will become what? Smaller or larger? If all the digits are equally likely, the branching factor is 10. If two of the digits, suppose digit 0 has a probability of 0.4, digit 1 has a probability of 0.4, and the rest of them has, equally 0.2 by 8. Okay. Now, if you play the Shannon game, or if you know what, will the branching factor reduce or will increase?
Reduce.
It will reduce because if you guess 0 or 1 is more likely. So the branching factor is smaller. So you can more accurately predict the next word. So a higher value of perplexity means smaller probability. So lower value of perplexity means lower branching factor. Okay. So this is what we say perplexity. Now, once we have defined perplexity, we can now, among the language models that we have studied, let us say we have unigram, bigram, trigram, 4gram, 5gram. So we can find out which one of them is more, which one of them is better. So we can take a corpus, and on that corpus, we can apply the bigram language model, unigram language model, trigram language model on a test corpus, and we can find out the perplexity. For example, this was an experiment on the Wall Street Journal corpus of 1.5 million words. So on this, the training was on 38 million words and the test was on 1.5 million words. So for the unigram model, the perplexity came out to be 962. For bigram model, 170. And for the trigram model, 109. So the perplexity is better for the trigram model on this corpus, on this data.
Ma'am, won't the perplexity will it always decrease as the the order increases?
Right. So that's a very good question. So let us see what will happen if we use a 10-gram model or 20-gram model. So I want the answer to come from you. You have given a very good question from you or any of the other students. So do you think that a perplexity of a 20-gram model will be better than the perplexity of a trigram or 4-gram model?
No, ma'am. It will be worse.
It would be extending.
Taking many probabilities multiplied.
Yeah. Sorry, can you repeat?
So we are taking many probabilities which will be multiplied together. So in that case, the probability will decrease, and if multiplied together, and hence
probability will decrease. We are normalizing, as we saw that for perplexity, we can do the normalization. That can be figured out. That is not the main issue. What is the main issue?
Ma'am, calculation of probability will be very errorful. Probability of Wi given W1, W2, Wi minus 1.
Why will it be errorful?
Because the sample space will be very less. The 20 sentences will appear very less. So the probability we estimated using corpus will be very errorful.
So is that 20 words, it's very unlikely that this sequence of 20 words has happened in the corpus before. So each possible sequence of 20 words will have very little or zero count. And if it is zero count, of course, we will decide that you have to have some way of handling it. But that handling will not give you a real estimate of the probability. So there are two things. One is, as I said, people are very creative with language. When you write something, when you write your report or something, it's unlikely that even if you have not cheated, that is why it becomes so much easy for teachers to catch plagiarism or cheating, right? If you write a program or you write an essay, and if 20 words match with another of your friend, it is very unlikely to convince me that both of you have independently produced these 20 words. Okay? So this exact set of the sequence of words is unlikely to have occurred in the corpus in many cases. And even if they occur so frequently that when we do the statistics, those statistics will not be correct. And we can try to do some filling up with smoothing, etc., but that will not give us the real values. So yes, when you go bigram, trigram, maybe 4-gram, up to some extent, it improves, but it does not improve always. However, that does not mean that you should not use all other words. There are ways of doing it, which we will. Anyway, so the time is over. I could not cover everything. I will load the slides and then we will have a discussion in the next class. Okay, thank you.
And ma'am, is something decided regarding like the group of 4 for the course project?
Okay, we'll come back. We'll discuss tomorrow. Okay.
Sure, ma'am. Thank you.